First of all, if you could, please tell us the definition of retrogression as it is applied to this particular plan.
Representative Nair.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm going to have Representative Weatherford take that question.
Representative Weatherford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's a good question, Representative Jenne. Thank you for bringing it forth. This has been talked about a lot, trying to define in a very finite manner the definition of retrogression. I don't know if I have a perfect answer for you, but I can tell you this. Retrogression, to me, and I think to the committee that has worked for these great bills, means not going backwards. It means that if you have a district, for example, that is a minority-majority district in a Section 5 county, it should not go backwards. It means that, for example, in Amendment 6, that speaks very clearly, in Amendment 5, that speaks very clearly to not having diminishment within the minority districts. I think that's what retrogression is.
Further questions? For a follow-up, Representative Jenne.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and Representative Weatherford, thank you for that. I'll address my questions back to Representative Nair, my dear friend Peter Nair. Some districts must be drawn to allow minorities to elect the representative of their choosing. But haven't the 2002 districts changed? And what I'm wondering really is, do we have to maintain 2002 minority districts in order to re-elect someone?
Representative Weatherford, is that a follow-up, or you want to? Representative Weatherford, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I appreciate it. It's a very good question. Look, I think that the federal law is extremely and implicitly clear. There are different things that you have to look at. For example, we have 5 counties within Florida that are Section 5 counties within the Voting Rights Act. We cannot allow for diminishment to take place within those 5 counties, certainly for districts that are within those 5 counties. But also, we have Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act that also says that you cannot take a district that is a minority-majority district and take it below 50%. On top of that, the voters in 2010 voted for Amendments 5 and 6 that very clearly stated as a Tier 1 criteria that we could not diminish the opportunity for minorities, communities to elect a candidate of their choice. And so I think it's pretty clear as to what we have to do and what we've done within these maps.
For a follow-up, Representative Jenne.
Again, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And it may be, these line of questions are along the same vein, so I'll address them to Representative Nair, but please feel free. What was the definition the committee used to determine if districts were racially fair? That threshold that you just spoke of, was there anything else? And was it that no plan could diminish the percentage of minority voters in any minority district below its current total, or are we just working with that 50% threshold? If you would, please, sir.
Representative Weatherford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. There is no specific threshold. It is a district-by-district analysis that we have to make. Certainly when you're going through the Department of Justice, they require certain data that we have to show and prove that we did not diminish a minority community's ability to elect a candidate of their choice.
For a follow-up, Representative Jenne.
And thank you again, Mr. Speaker. Next question, whoever needs to answer it. Does compliance with the Constitution require the use of minority voting data, majority voting data, performance in various elections, ability of minority voters to elect? And I was wondering if you could tell me why or why not, depending upon your answer, of course.
Representative Weatherford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Again, a good question. The Voting Rights Act and the Department of Justice, as well as in order for us to make sure that we have not diminished according to Amendments 5 and 6, we do have to use data to show that we have not taken away that community's ability to vote for a candidate of their choice.
For a follow-up, Representative Jenne.
Again, thank you, Mr. Speaker. As I had the opportunity and the honor to sit on these committees, there was a lot of talk, it seemed to be wherever at least that I went, and my colleagues reiterated to me that they heard a lot on the different legs of the trip. But there was a lot of talk about making preservations of minority districts a priority. I think we can all agree upon that. Is there any numerical formula, any at all? We know that now, that there isn't. So how then do we know if the plan diminishes or does not diminish the ability if we're not using any specific type of threshold?
Representative Weatherford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think I answered that question before, but it is a district-by-district analysis. So there is no specific threshold as a district-by-district analysis. And I would also add that it wasn't just this body that agrees that is a Tier 1 standard to protect people's ability to elect a candidate of their choice. 63% of the voting public in 2010 also agreed.
Representative Jenne.
Again, thank you, Mr. Speaker. If the plan packs large minorities of Democratic voters into some districts, is that evidence, or can we take that as evidence as the plan is intended to favor one party or another? If we see packing, really, not just of Democrats, and I apologize because that's my point of view, but in either party, if we're packing people in, is that evidence to show that it was intended to favor one group or the other, sir?
Representative Weatherford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'm very proud of the fact that our maps do not have any packing within them whatsoever. It's not a part of any of our maps. We made sure of that, and it's nowhere within any one of these House, Congressional, or Senate maps. There is no packing whatsoever.
Representative Jenne.
Thank you, Speaker. Based on the map that we're currently presented with, does it represent the greatest number of minority or coalition districts that could have been drawn? If no, why not? If the answer is yes, could you please tell us how you know that?
Representative Weatherford.
Certainly, we can give you a lot of data on the districts that were drawn that potentially could vote for would give communities the ability to vote for a candidate of their choice, but there is no requirement in law that you maximize anything like that, and so that is not something that we look to do.
Representative Jenne.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If it's statistically probable that minority voters will elect a candidate of their choice with 40% minority voting age population, is it constitutionally permissible for that district to contain 55%, 65%, 75%, so on and so forth?
Representative Weatherford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Again, I don't believe there's a numeric standard that you can unilaterally paint across the entire state of Florida. I think that it is a district-by-district analysis that you have to run through to make sure that you feel confident that that community would be able to vote for a candidate of their choice. There is no number that you can put your hat on and say that that is the magic number. It does not exist.
Representative Jenne.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, as always. Was election performance data used, Representative Weatherford, to determine if districts improved or diminished the ability of minorities to elect candidates of their choice? If yes, you could define what that data was, and I'll save the rest for follow-up if necessary, dependent upon your answer.
Representative Weatherford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Department of Justice actually requires that we use performance data to prove that the districts that we've drawn continue to allow a community to elect a candidate of their choice. Our staff, along with our attorneys, look at that data and they analyze it on a district-by-district basis to make sure that that is taking place. So the answer is yes.
Representative Jenne.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And can we ask where the source of that data was?
Representative Weatherford.
So the source is the Department of State Division of Elections. And also I would like to point out on the earlier question as well, if I could, Mr. Speaker, that we only use that data when dealing with the minority districts.
Representative Jenne.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Switching gears, I'm gonna go back because these next set of questions deal with incumbency, and perhaps it'll go back to you, Chairman Weatherford, but I'll formally address them to Chairman Nair at this point until I know otherwise. Chairman Nair, if the 2002 districts were drawn in order to preserve incumbency or to help any particular political party, is that something relevant to determining whether or not we can simply keep the 2012 districts and plans approximately the same as configured in 2002, because I have to be quite honest, when I look over things, it seems to be that they're very, very similar in nature.
Representative Nair.
Mr. Speaker, once again, I'd like to yield to Representative Weatherford.
Representative Weatherford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I could not disagree more. I don't think our districts in 2012 reflect very much of anything in 2002. But I would also like to point out that I don't think anybody here can specifically talk about what the intent of the legislature was 10 years ago. I didn't serve in this body. We may have a couple of retreads who were here when we went through that process in 2002. But I was not one of them. And so I can't speak to that. There's nothing wrong with being a retread, Representative Frisch.
The record shall so reflect. Representative Jenne.
I like to refer to them as veterans, Chairman. If a district is composed of 70% voters of the same party as the incumbent, some might say that it's evidence of an intent to favor said incumbent. I was wondering if you could explain why or why not in your particular view.
Representative Weatherford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I don't think that's a factor in whether or not the maps that we drew were compliant with Amendments 5 and 6 in the Federal Voting Rights Act. I mean, we have very clear standards, both in statute, federal statute, and we have very clear standards in the state constitution, which we abided by. But one of those standards is not whether or not a district looks anything similar to the way it looked 10 years ago when it was drawn. So I guess I just don't follow that line of questioning.
Representative Jenne.
Fair enough. Next question would be this. Were there any iterations, models of any maps that included any member's actual residence intentionally placed there?
Representative Weatherford.
Very proud to say absolutely not, and I think a lot of the members in this chamber could speak to that.
Representative Jenne.
At least I can. Were there any discussions with members about whether their residence would be in a district with another residence or any other incumbent? Was the Democratic Party of Florida solicited to give their input, or was the Republican Party of Florida solicited to give their input?
Representative Weatherford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Our job was to comply with the Amendments 5 and 6 in our Constitution and to comply with the federal statutes of the Voting Rights Act. Where people lived was inconsequential. We did not look at that information, and I think that's reflected in our maps.
Representative Jenne.
Thank you. And then to the second part of that question would be, was there anyone reaching out, did anyone reach out to the Florida Democratic Party or the Republican Party of Florida on behalf of this chamber?
Representative Weatherford.
No.
Representative Jenne.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And this is the final question that I have. Based on publicly available historic election data, as certified by our very own Secretary of State, the Senate plan overwhelmingly it favors one particular party, while creating only 14 districts that would give the minority party a chance at winning. On a fair plan based on a 50-50 statewide partisan vote in this state, wouldn't that allow for 20 and 20? And can you tell me why doesn't this plan shake out that way?
Representative Weatherford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Of course, I cannot speak for the Senate, but we certainly, and I agree with the Senate, I believe the Senate would say the same thing, that we did not use political data in drawing these maps, and so it's kind of hard to answer a question about what we knew in regards to political data when we didn't use it. But you know, nowhere in the standards to talk about trying to draw districts with any type of partisanship or any type of number involved. It had very clear standards. It talked about Tier 1 standards of making sure there was no political intent, had very clear standards about preserving a community's ability to vote for a candidate of their choice, compactness, cities and counties, all those things. Doesn't talk about the question that you just asked.
One more. Representative Jenne, you recognize.
And I appreciate your indulgence, Mr. Speaker. Some of my colleagues started getting in my ear for a second. They wanted me to ask a follow-up to a previous question. Before I had asked if any information had been solicited from any political party, the question that I was asked to then reframe would be, was there any communication either between the House of Representatives, anyone working for the House of Representatives and the Florida Democratic Party or the Republican Party of Florida, be it telephone, email, fax, Skype, anything at all?
Representative Weatherford.
No, that I know of.